The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. On today's show, we're going to review Austin's big win against Portland. We'll also talk about our new player signing and some other potential signings, and we'll preview the upcoming game against LAFC. My name's Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley. So, Landon, yesterday was the 4th of July. Do you have a tradition? Is there anything that happens with you and Ashley and Tito or anything that you want to share with the people that sort of makes your 4th of July special?
No, we actually have no traditions, and I'm kind of a fuddy-dud and don't even really like firecrackers. And so, yeah, Ashley's actually leaving town next week, and so instead of traveling to visit family, we decided just to lay low. We went over to our neighbor's house and just like hung out with our neighbor, who's like she's probably in her 50s, but she's like a cool lady, and her and some of her friends came over and were just like telling us stories about old Austin and like going to Liberty Lunch and Armadillo World headquarters and like meeting musicians and stuff like that. So it ended up being kind of a fun night.
That's a good way to spend the day, man. I don't think that's bad. I watched because I watched it every 4th, Independence Day, the classic
nice
alien invasion movie, and it's this makes me feel very old now, but it's the 25th anniversary of that.
Is it really?
Of that movie? So I spent quite a while, and I guess I'll link to this in the show notes, but I spent a long time reading like an oral history of that film, which is pretty fascinating because, like, basically the guys that wrote it, like they used the first draft of the script. Like there's all kinds of stuff that they're like, oh, we'll change it later, and they like ran out of time, all the way down to like Bill. Gotta get the right Bill. Bill Pullman's like big speech, at the end about today being it was like the first draft of the speech and the guy's like, oh, I'll fix it later, don't worry about it. It ended up being like the big rallying speech of the whole movie. So we did that. That's sort of my tradition. And then we got the neighbors and kids together and had hot dogs and hamburgers and found some like low to the ground, smoky but not super loud fireworks to shoot off, as is what we do as Americans. So it was a good day for us too.
I know last time I saw you in person, you were going to buy fireworks and were afraid you weren't going to be able to find them, but it sounds like you ended up getting some.
Yeah, we did. We got in early ahead of the fireworks shortage. We had to go to 2 different stands to do it, and probably spent more than one reasonably ought to, but the boys were happy. And when we spent like an hour this morning cleaning up all the parts that were laying all over the yard.
All right, well, let's talk about some soccer. So I know like we've had a few rough weeks in the last couple of months soccer wise, and I'm not always excited to record the episode. I was like, I don't want to talk about the stupid soccer game and record this stupid podcast, but this week I was excited to talk about it. And I'm of course just kidding. We always enjoy making a show, and we're very appreciative of the folks that listen to it, but genuinely excited to talk about this game because Austin scored 4 goals, which is something they hadn't done in, was it 6 or 7 games that they hadn't scored any goals?
Well, or hadn't scored more than one, right? They had the one against Kansas City, but I think that was out of 7. And so they scored almost as many goals on Thursday night as they scored all year, right? I mean, they had 6 going in and got from 6 to 10.
Yeah. So what were some of the questions that we or others had going into this game?
Unsurprisingly, one, which we talked about last week, was will we ever score? About where the goals were coming from. And what Josh said and we'll get into this more in the post-match press conference during the week, he talked about how they were on the verge of multiple goals, but missing the final action. He particularly talked about how they did that against Columbus. It was a fairly complete game. It just, until they got on the end of things, they didn't score a goal.
Yeah, I think in the press conference, he also talked about just like not pressing too hard for a goal and not trying too hard for a goal. And that's going to come up again as we go through this game as well. But there's a lot of things that Josh Wolff said that they were working on, or we're going to spend some time on, or we're going to have meetings about, that ended up kind of working out and looked like that it paid off during this game for sure.
And then I have a question for you too. And this is a phrase that I've heard. He talked about it specifically before this match. It's a phrase I've heard, and I should know what it means. But he talked about Portland's low block. And I know there's a low block, and I believe there's a high block. But for like somebody that doesn't know a whole lot about tactics, like what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so it's going to refer to their defensive setup. So it's essentially a low block is like the opposite of a high press. And so like Austin generally will play a high block or like a high press a lot of times, which they did in this game. A low block is going to be where instead of being proactive while you're defending and kind of going after people, like you watch Liverpool. Liverpool usually plays a very high block, a very proactive pressing system. Portland generally plays a lower block where they will sit a little deeper and let the offense kind of bring the ball to them as opposed to trying to press back on them. So that's essentially all that's referring to is how high are you setting that like that line of pressure.
All right. Well, thank you for filling me in on that because it's something I've heard, meant to ask about, never have. And I think let's talk about the lineup now. It changed a little bit. Hector Jimenez was back in at right back. We got Danny Pereira healthy, but the midfield looked a little bit different than we expected before. So why don't you fill us in on that?
Yeah. So whenever the MLS website released kind of their little graphic of what they thought the lineup was going to be, I immediately looked at it and was like, this is wrong. I don't think this is exactly how we're going to be lining up, because they had Danny Pereira lined up at right wing and he's never ever played there. And so I was like, I'm guessing we're going to see Fagundes on the wing, which did end up happening. But even that being known, it did look a lot different in practice than it did on paper there. So we ended up having the back four you'd expect. So Kolmanich, Beasler, Cascante, Jimenez. In the midfield, it was Ring, Pochettino, Pereira, and then Fagundes, Dominguez, and Gallagher up front, with Fagundes on the left and Gallagher on the right, which was something I wasn't sure which side those two guys were going to be playing on. And then Dominguez at the striker position. And so defending, they were kind of sitting in that 4-4-2, which what we've seen for several games in a row now, I think, where Pochettino would kind of go up alongside Dominguez and press the center backs, and then the rest of the wingers will drop back into a line of four with the central midfielders. So that was the defensive shape. In attack, we saw some pretty interesting stuff going on. So a lot of times with the ball, they would shift into what looked a lot like a 3-4-3. So Ring would drop between the center backs, and then you would have Pereira and Pochettino kind of in the center, and then Fagundes and Gallagher on the wing still, but a little more narrow than what we've normally seen the wingers play. And the fullbacks were pushing really high into the midfield, like on level or ahead of the central midfielders. So they essentially kind of became midfielders and even attackers. Kolmanich was getting really high a lot of times and was kind of creating the width up high and was receiving the ball, like kind of stretching the line from midfielders, receiving the ball from midfielders. So a lot of kind of fluidity and movement and rotation in this system, but a lot of times it did end up looking kind of like a 3-4-3 with Ring in that back line. So kind of looking back, I was asking the question, like, what does dropping Ring back like that give to us? And I think watching the game again and kind of watching little bits of it back again, I think number one, as I mentioned, it allows the fullbacks to push up really high without exposing the center backs on transition, which Portland is a team who, like we said, sitting in that low block would try to break away in transition and kind of hit you on the counter attack. That kind of allows our fullbacks to get high, but keeping Ring deeper, they can do that without exposing our slow center backs essentially. And so whenever we would turn it over, a lot of times you would see Ring kind of step forward and slow down that counterattack. So the center backs could kind of drop and get into position while Ring stepped forward and slowed down the counterattack. Whereas if Ring was already high and we turned it over in the midfield, one of the center backs would have to step to it, leaving the other one back there on his own. So yeah, that's one thing it did to it. I think another thing which was interesting and I wouldn't have thought about was it let Denny Pereira kind of stay central and kind of distribute and create and dribble from a central position without making him be like that number 6 destroyer. So if you think back to the game after Ring's red card, was that the Galaxy?
Yeah, that was a Galaxy. Which when you were talking about us finally being exciting this week, I was trying to think about like what the most depressing game week was. And like Minnesota was probably the worst individual game, but we had Columbus after that, right? So we like that was good to talk about. But I feel like the week of the Galaxy match was probably the week I was like least into talking about what was going on, because it was just a bad time all the way around.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, during that Galaxy game, Wolff decided to play Danny Pereira at the 6, which creatively and like offensively, he's good from that area and did some really good stuff. But most of the time is when he was kind of pushing forward. But as far as defensively goes, he's nowhere near, doesn't have anywhere near the skill set that Alex Ring does in just kind of being that destroyer, like that enforcer position. And so this, again, leaving Ring deeper, it allowed Pereira to be in that central area and be really creative and kind of move the ball around or drive forward at times. And he didn't really have to worry about what was behind him because he knew he had Ring back there kind of watching his back during those moments. So I thought that was really interesting. And as far as other positional things go, so we said Fagundes was on the left wing, but it was very positionally flexible, moved inside a lot, would a lot of times end up in kind of his standard, like those dual tins, he would end up in those positions. And if you look at, I was looking on whoscored.com and they have like kind of an average position chart. Diego Fagundes' average position throughout the game is like just to the left of the center circle. And so although his nominal position was starting out on that left wing, he floated inside a lot. Him and Kolmanich would kind of trade off, and Kolmanich would run inside and they'd do little 1-2s. And Jimenez was doing the same thing with Pochettino and with Gallagher, and then Stroud later in the game on there. He would cut inside and they would play little 1-2s. So a lot of really like interesting and creative things happening. And then so that's a lot of what kind of made this game so much fun to watch and what allowed them to have so much possession and have so much useful possession during this game.
Yeah, I kept all throughout the match, the possession numbers, I kept waiting for those to change because they were really dominant. And we'll get, I think we could talk about it a little bit, but you know, they had the most of possession like from the bat and all throughout. And it was like watching a different, I guess this is like the best of Josh Wolff's style of play. It was probably the game tonight. Like it was, you could see all the things that they had been trying to do, the things that we talked about before about, you know, no overlapping runs through the box and all those things. Like all those things came to light in the game on Thursday. So let's get into a little bit of the game highlights. The first goal, did you see it coming? I guess we should talk about it first.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could feel it coming, right? Like it felt different than the Columbus game, didn't it? Like in the Columbus game, it was like, oh, we're doing a lot of cool stuff, like really good stuff. And then that, just like that, the final ball was never there. The final decision, it was like, we're getting in great positions, but I still never like felt it. And in the first like 10 minutes of this game, I was like, I think they're going to score today. Like it looked like it was going to happen. It took 28 minutes to happen, but yeah, it was John Gallagher ended up scoring the first ever goal, home, like Austin FC goal at Q2 Stadium. I don't want to take anything away from Kristen Press.
Yeah. Or I even saw somebody talk about whichever U13 kid scored the first.
Oh yeah,
first goal. So yes, the first Austin FC home goal at Q2 Stadium.
Yeah. But yeah, so talking about the best version of Josh Wolff's play, this goal was like a Josh Wolff goal. This is like his dream goal. I imagine he's watched this 1,000 times and just like drooling at it essentially. But Tomas Pochettino actually drops in really deep. They're kind of working it around and not really getting a look that they like, or not getting numbers in the right spots. And so Pochettino ends up dropping way deep in between the center backs. he plays a ball to John Gallagher's feet as he was kind of checking back. And then he follows his pass and runs from in between the center backs and kind of takes an arcing run out to the right wing, because as Gallagher dropped, he saw that there was space over there. And so in kind of this setup, he had the freedom to do that. And so he's like, I'm just going to go take that space now. And so he follows that through. Gallagher drops it to Cascante. Cascante pushes the ball forward across midfield and then plays it into Cecilio's feet as he's checking in this time. Cecilio plays a one-time flick kind of like behind him and to the left to John Gallagher, who had kind of checked back again and then started moving forward. Gallagher is able, it's kind of a tricky ball. The ball ends up kind of high and Gallagher is able to get a leg up to it and control it and turns towards goal. And then he drops the ball out wide to Pochettino, who, as I said, had run 50 or 60 yards from the defending half to get over to that right wing. He drops it to Pochettino. Diego Fagundes at that moment makes a near post run. And at the same time, John Gallagher is running kind of inside towards the penalty spot. And then Cecilio is posted up at the top of the box waiting for a cutback. And so some of like the lack of creative movement in the box that we had been talking about in the last few games, this is a good example of what can happen when you do have good movement in the box.
Yeah, I want to ask, so that Diego Fagundes run, I mean, that's what freed Gallagher, right? Like there was a guy that followed Fagundes at the near post that left the space for Gallagher to come in behind. I think that's
was
right.
Bonilla, the right back, follows Fagundes all the way through the box. And so, so right after that, Pochettino kind of cuts it back towards the penalty spot. It lands right on Gallagher's stride, and all Gallagher has to do is just throw a foot at it. Steve Clark is covering his near post, and so Gallagher has an angle. If he just throws a foot at it and hits it far post, it's in, and that's what he does. Scores it easy as that. But yeah, there would have likely been more traffic in that area had Fagundes not made that run. And then also he kept Steve Clark honest there as well. The goalkeeper had to stay near post because that run was coming in. Whereas if everyone was just running in a straight line, he could have been a bit more comfortable there. But really good team goal. And it's, like I said, it's Wolff's dream goal. It's positional play using possession and movement to disorganize the opponent. And that's exactly what happened. And boom, you score a goal.
Yeah, and it didn't take long for them to go up 2-0 and create further pandemonium in the south end. And this one was another one that Cascante factored really heavily in. So this is on the first two goals. I think he was a big part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is a moment where I think Chris Bills was kind of predicting that Austin FC's first home goal might come from like a counter press situation or like a counterattack situation. And that's what this one was. So Portland have a goal kick. They play it out short. The left center back, Zuparic, has the ball just outside the 18-yard box. He plays a long ball kind of towards the center circle, and it's meant for Ibobisi. And he plays it a little bit short, and it would have been kind of awkward to control for Ibobisi, but Cascante drops in with him and ends up winning the ball out of the air and heads it really hard, like forward, but keeps it low. It's going kind of towards the center back. Cecilio runs around that center back and beats him to the ball. Again, you guessed it, the one-time flick, which is kind of Cecilio's signature move the last few games, and has created some really dangerous moments, but just touches it one time, kind of flicks it on, finds Diego Fagundes in a bunch of space, and he's 1v1 with the keeper. So takes one or two touches, hits it far post. Steve Clark is able to get a hand to it, but it's not enough to get through that, and that ends up 2-0 right there. And one thing in the little hype video thing that Austin FC released this week, listeners, if you haven't seen that, check it out because it's really cool. But they play a little clip of Wolff in the locker room before the game. And one of the things he says is, win your duels, like focus on your individual game. And if you win your duels, then collectively we will win this game. And this is a great example of that right here. Cascante wins that duel. Cecilio wins a duel. And then Fagundes is able to beat the keeper with his shot. And so I think it's just a moment of these little small moments where if you just work harder than the guy you're going against, you can make things happen. And then just the system isn't enough. You have to be fighting and winning those duels within the system. And again, this is just a really good example here.
Bill's talked about the environment too. I think if you read his article, I think it was the one right after the game, just sort of about the fan environment and the way the place exploded. And we talked last week about how, and fourth tap too, about how we might have to buy a whole new stadium once a goal finally happens because we're going to blow the roof off of it. And that was the reaction on the first goal, but I feel like even more on the second goal because there was a little bit of breathing room there, and they were really looking to dominate that at that point too. So it was a beautiful goal. I mean, the fans were going wild. I think Chris said he kind of hung outside the press box to take in the just the emotion of the moment. So it was a beautiful goal and a really exciting time to be in the stadium too.
Did you feel like the pop, like the sound on the second goal was like louder than the first one?
Yeah, I did, which is weird because it wasn't the first goal in Q2, which I thought would be the loudest one. But I felt like the second one, maybe because it was
I think we just like saw it coming a little bit more. Mm-hmm. The first one was like a little bit out of nowhere. Like you could tell we were in a dangerous position, but like Gallagher didn't have time to like wind up. Like you didn't know he was shooting or if he was even going to get to that ball. Like he had to take a pretty big stride just to get a foot on it. And once he touches it, it's in the net before I realized it was a goal scoring opportunity. And so I think maybe that had a lot to do with it. But with Fagundez's goal, it was like you could kind of see it coming there for a second, and I think maybe that had a lot to do with it. But either way, both of those and the next two goals, it was extremely loud in that stadium, and it was a pretty cool atmosphere to be a part of.
Yeah, it was. And so after that, it got a little weird through the 35th or 40th minute. That was the odd VAR check.
Yeah, it was like several minutes, probably 5 minutes or so.
Yeah,
that they had to take out to do this weird VAR check that ended up being checking 2 or 3 different calls and ended up with 2 Austin FC players getting yellow cards when maybe really we should have gotten a penalty.
Yeah, right. Because I guess Cecilia was kind of calling for a penalty, and so Comanis was one of them, right? He got a yellow for a really.
I think it's like a hard foul in, like it could have been kind of a breakaway situation. So after watching it again a couple of times, I'm not too upset with that one. And then Pochettino got one for dissent.
Yeah,
arguing about the penalty call, I think, but. What did you think about not giving that penalty call?
I didn't have a problem with not giving that penalty call. I didn't feel like that was a clear and obvious penalty. And especially it didn't at the time watching it live, I just couldn't understand where the delay was because it didn't seem like anything obvious on the field. Now going back.
Oh, really? I had the exact opposite
did you not?
reaction.
Okay.
I thought it was a clear penalty in the moment. It just looked really dangerous in the moment. And after watching the replay, I understand it a little bit more because I think it was Bonilla, that same right back we mentioned earlier, slides in, and at first his studs are up and about 1.5 feet off the ground. He does I don't think he meant those studs for Cecilio's leg. He was going after the ball, and he ends up kind of pulling his feet down before contact is made, and it ended up not really being that dangerous of a play, but that's not the intention of the rule. It's I tried to kick this guy in the face, but I missed, and so it doesn't count. No, that's not the rule. If you do something that's dangerous, it should be a foul, and if that foul happens in the penalty box, then it's a penalty. But after the replay, I thought it was gray enough that I was a little bit more okay, but I was pretty angry about it in the stadium that they didn't give it.
So maybe my problem is after seeing Cecilia go down enough, I'm just like, oh, Cecilia's on the ground again. I could just stop reacting to that. But I don't know.
He did win a yellow card. I think he got Tuiloma a yellow card. I don't remember when in the game this was, but I don't think Tuiloma touched him. He got him a yellow card for it. But so it's in these moments where, like like I mentioned before, kind of the risk reward of Cecilio's flopping, and I think this game, some of it kind of paid off, but I don't think that's always going to be the case for sure.
No, what that did lead to was a whole bunch of added time at the end of the first half, and the downside of that being that Portland did finally manage to pick up their one goal of the match there right before the half. I have it at 45 plus 7, I believe is what it was.
Yeah, and I think there were only 6 minutes of added time, and it was in the 7th minute of it. It was like a few guys got beat earlier on in this little sequence, but I think the final play comes down to just really good execution from Portland. I think maybe there's a few little decisions that could have been made, but really it was a good ball and a good finish by Ebobisse there. I got a little bit nervous about that one because momentum had been 100% in Austin's direction up until kind of the end of that first half, and then they scored that goal. I was like, oh man, we can't let them kind of swing it back the other way. And so I was a little bit nervous going into halftime there.
Yeah, I was too, because you never know what happens there. It would have been a shame. I mean, thinking about the negative outcome out of that with how dominant Austin had been in possession and how much they had done all the things right. You know, if somehow they'd blown that 2-0 lead and ended up with a 2-2 draw, that would have been an injustice to the way that they played. But luckily, that's not how it turned out.
Yeah. Jared Stroud ends up coming on for Gallagher at halftime. He injured his foot, I think in the first 5 minutes or so, and went down, I think in the 25th minute, and had to come off the field. He comes back on the field in the 27th minute or so, and I think 30 seconds later scores that first goal. And so I think he was playing through a lot of pain in that first half, but at halftime I think it was just too much, and ended up coming off. They put Stroud on then.
So was that? So do you think that primal scream after the goal, was that pain, joy, or some combination of both?
Probably a combination. Just all of the emotions happening at the same time there. But yeah, he looked pretty happy to score that goal for sure. The next goal comes in the 77th minute. This was a set piece. I think Fagundes ended up getting a foul out wide right. Cecilio takes the free kick. He curls it in towards the penalty spot, and Austin FC players were kind of in a line, all just running towards the goal, and it was played a little bit behind it. And Ring was the first one to kind of notice that and adjust to it. And so the defenders all kind of kept running, and Ring was able to drop back and get his head on it. But at first I was like, oh, this is kind of an easy, unmarked ball, but it was kind of an awkward angle for Ring. I think he did really well to get as good of a header on as he did, but gets his head on it, kind of floats it towards the far side, hits the side net just inside the far post, and the keeper didn't have a chance against it. So really great goal there. And he runs towards the supporter section there and is saying, "This is our house, boys." And he just said this is our house probably, but I know that Jeremiah enjoys how much
him talking about the boys.
Alex says the boys.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the team.
Yeah. So he wasn't maybe he was he jumping away from goal when he left? He was moving the opposite way even in the air, right?
Yeah, he's leaning. He had to run back and kind of jumped away from goal. It was definitely leaning at an angle away from the goal when he hit it with his head. So it was a much more impressive goal than I thought it was at first.
Yeah, and before he ran to the supporter section, he had a bit of a winding path. I feel like he started to go to the sideline, and then he ran to the supporter section, and then so you think he read his lips at some point after the goal? Do you have a guess about what he was talking about?
Yeah, I saw some people online talking about saying where was Ring going after that goal, and I watched it back and kind of did some investigating, and I think he's running towards the bench. After he goes and celebrates with the supporter section, he runs over to the bench, and I think he's saying, "Where's Aki? Where's Aki?" And he's referring to Aki Tajima, who is the director of sports medicine. And my guess is that he wanted to thank him for getting him fit enough to play over the last couple of weeks, because we didn't think he was going to play in the Columbus game, and came back, and he was talking about how much work they had to do over those 48 hours to get his foot in good enough condition to play. And I'm guessing that's who it was, because I saw that, and then I had heard just from someone in the stadium that he eventually went like over onto the bench and was hugging one of the technical staff. And so I think that's all he was doing, was just going to go over and like, thanks for getting me fit enough to play.
Yeah, and I love that. I love everything about Alex Ring. What was he in the pregame? In the video, he had a good like daring curse word too. He's a leader of men. Do you remember that?
I don't remember what he said.
Yeah, the highlight video, he got me all fired up. I love that guy.
Next one came not long after that, from Hector Jimenez. So there's kind of a little scramble in the center of the field. Fagundes ends up with the ball. He plays a soft pass upfield. I think he was playing it towards would have been towards Stroud, and their left back Van Rankin intercepts it, but he takes a bit of a heavy touch. And this is again one of these moments where winning your duels, kind of fighting for every ball, can turn into something. So Van Rankin intercepts that soft pass, but takes a heavy touch, and Jimenez was already counter pressing, was on his way towards the ball. And so whenever Van Rankin takes that heavy touch, Jimenez gets there first, and he's able to kind of like lift the ball, like do a little flick, and then jumps over Van Rankin's outstretched leg where he's trying to tackle him. And just that move alone was pretty impressive. And then moves towards goal, and I think he takes one touch towards goal, and then he lays it off to Stroud outright. Stroud takes one touch towards goal, and then cuts it back to Hector Jimenez at the top of the box. He receives it across his body, which I thought was a really smart move there. Receives it across his body so he can kind of face up to goal, and then does this little hesitation move and just absolutely murders Bill Tuiloma, just puts him in the ground. And so Bill Tuiloma goes to ground, and Hector just kind of steps around him and then buries it to the far post. And I think this might have been my favorite goal of the game, just because of just how much like arrogance Jimenez had in that moment to pull that off, like the calmness in the box, and how just confident he never looked like he wasn't going to pull it off.
Yeah, and what I kept thinking about after watching Tuiloma go down was, if that had been us, like what would we have been saying about Matt Beasler, right? It would have been like, oh, he's finally passed it. This is it. He can never see the field again. Or if that was Cascante, we would have had the Portland Timbers, fans among us being like, see, we told you. There's like one time every game when he's going to look like a fool and he's going to get left. So I was very happy to see us do that to somebody else.
Absolutely. And whenever I was watching this, my first thought in that moment was like, in previous games, Stroud shoots that ball. And I think like Wolff must have talked to him. They must have been going over these kinds of things, but Stroud shoots that ball in a previous game. And instead he slows down and takes that extra pass inside and gives Hector a way easier path to goal there. I watched the press conference from Monday, July 5th, with Wolff, and he actually brings up a meeting where he said, we spent an hour and 15 minutes analyzing these attacking moments and kind of looking at like, okay, how did we get into this position? Did we make the right decision? What else could we have done? And then Wolff directly linked it to this play and said like, Stroud, instead of shooting across goal, makes the decision to cut it back in, which creates that goal. And so I think it's really good sign that Wolff is taking these teaching moments and that the players are responding to them and changing what they're doing in these game situations, because it's a lot of decision making, right? Like, I don't think Stroud is necessarily a selfish player. I think he just like felt like maybe rushed it a little bit and felt like that was going to be the safest bet or the best bet there. But instead here, he took what Wolff was teaching him into consideration, slowed it down, cut it back, easy goal. And so, yeah, I think it's just extremely encouraging to see the players really responding to the things that the coaching staff is trying to teach them.
Yeah, let's talk about, Jimenez. We can talk about Hector Jimenez first. Let's do that if we're going to talk about players. He had an incredible game, and he hit the post once too in the second half.
He did. That one was that was great. It ended up, I think it was Zuparic, like got the very top of his head to the ball and pushed it onto the post. Otherwise, he would have roofed one from outside the box, and that would have had a goal earlier than what he did. But Hector Jimenez was really good against Columbus and was maybe even better in this game. But I think it begs the question, who is our best right back right now? Because I think what was the game where Jimenez got injured and had to come out early?
Was that
Minnesota? I think that was also Galaxy.
Oh, was it Galaxy too? Oh, great.
Yeah, because I think it was Sebastian Lletget that he was trying to defend whenever that happened. But during that game, he had some really, really strong moments going forward. And so after that game, I was like, I think Jimenez is a lot stronger than Lima going forward, but Lima is probably still a better defender. And after these last couple of games, I'm like, I'm not sure if Lima's a better defender either. He's a much more aggressive defender and like a more physical presence than Jimenez is, but Jimenez did really well against some big, strong attackers over the last couple of weeks and held his own, was really good going forward. I'm not sure what the timeline is with Lima coming back, but if Lima were healthy on Wednesday, who would you start at right back?
I would start Hector Jimenez right back on Wednesday.
I think I'd have to do the same thing. I don't know if there's a way, like, it's a good problem to have, right? To have too many good players, but we spent a lot of money on Nick Lima.
Yeah, I think for me, it's one of these things where having two games a week and stuff later in the year, that these minutes will work themselves out. Just like
that's true.
Having three pretty decent center backs, like there's gonna be enough playing time to go around for everybody, and I feel like it'll be the same way a little bit. Jimenez is 30 something, 32, so he probably won't be able to go every 90 minutes every match, but what a good problem to have. And when he went down against LA, I mean, it looked bad. That was another one of those where you're like, oh gosh, is Jimenez going to be back at all?
Yeah.
And then we talked about MCL sprains. You never really know. And luckily it didn't take that long, and he's been amazing since coming back.
Yeah, and was probably forced into this many minutes before Wolff and the training staff would have wanted him to, but he's looked fantastic so far. Who else? I guess Ring and Cecilio both ended up in the MLS Team of the Week. I think you arguably could have put two or three other Austin players on the team as well. But Ring ended up he made 110 passes with 94% passing accuracy. A lot of those are going to be because of where he was playing and the way we were playing. A lot of those are short passes, but still, just to make that many and to be that accurate with them is impressive. He had 2 interceptions, 2 clearances, and 1 blocked shot. And then, of course, scored 1 goal. And then, as Alex Ring always does a lot of other things that they are unable to assign numbers to. But there's been a few people, and it is just a few people on Twitter. It's not that many that have seemed to have something against Alex Ring, and not only think that, like, I could see someone saying like Alex Ring is not our best player, which at some points in the season, and probably still, I would argue he is, but people saying he's outright bad. And I just do not get that.
Yeah, I don't get that at all either. And I saw that like in the official on Reddit or the Facebook group or somewhere too, like people asking questions about Alex Ring was actually any good. And then somebody came to his defense and saying like, no, he was really, really good at Red Bulls, and he was our captain. And I'm like,
NYCFC.
No, I know, but the person saying that he was a genius is like, yeah, he was the captain at Red Bulls. I'm like, I don't think you should be commenting on Alex Ring's career by leading on that point.
Yeah, really good performance, and then as we mentioned before, a really good goal. Cecilio was also on the Team of the Week. He had 3 key passes, 2 assists, and then again made some really good runs, pulling defenders out of space on some of the other goals. He had. We mentioned that that Hector Jimenez shot that ended up going off the post. Did you see him trying to get out of the way of that shot? Did you see the
No, I
replay of
missed
that?
that. I
It
missed
was
that.
pretty excellent. He was in the box and like I can't remember what happened, but the ball was in the box and kind of like got deflected back out to Jimenez at the top of the box, and Cecilio was kind of chasing it out away from goal, was going to try to get the ball, and he saw Jimenez kind of winding up to shoot it, and Cecilio just like drops flat to the ground and puts his face in the ground and covers his face up. This is like, I just got to get out of the way and like let Hector shoot this ball. But he does that, and then you see him like pop up and look around to see if anybody's still around. But it was a good awareness by Cecilio, but also very entertaining to watch. But yeah, really good game by Cecilio, playing in not his natural position, but doing some really good work both offensively and defensively to be a really important player for this team over the last couple of games. John Gallagher had a solid half when he was in, got that first goal, so he'll be in Austin FC history for sure. I think in the press conference on Monday, Wolff said that we'll probably not expect him for LAFC. Chris Bills posted some pictures from training today, which is Monday. We're recording this on Monday. And he was not on crutches and was walking around, but was not training with the team. And Wolff said that he's going to need some time to get back. So we'll probably not expect him to be playing against LAFC. Who else we got?
I want to talk about Brad Stuver, or the fact that we, for once, don't talk about Brad Stuver. He didn't have a ton of work to do for the first time in a while.
0 saves.
Yeah. So they have one shot. Is that right? They have one shot on target?
One shot on target and it went in.
Yeah.
So, and it was from 2 feet away, and Stuver was no way Stuver was going to save that one. So, yeah, he got to take a little bit of a break for this one, which he deserves.
Yeah, and good for him, for sure, for everything he's done. He talked. So when we were at Fourth Tap, somebody asked about how long Brad Stuver would be in Austin, and it made me sad.
Yeah.
And in midweek, he talked about how much he loved Austin and said he would love to play here forever or make the best of his 2 to 3 years here, which I'm also going with playing forever. But, you know, he knows better than me how long his deal is. So I don't think we have to worry about him leaving at the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't know. You would guess with a lot of these free agent guys that it would just be like a 1 or 2 year deal. But I think where he's at in his career, and he's not on that much money. I think it's 150,000. We could afford to give him a decent little pay raise, enough to keep him around. And just because of where he's at in his career, as much as they seem to have kind of inserted themselves into the community, I think we'll be able to keep Stuver around. Even if he is on a 1 year contract, I think we'll be able to keep him because he's on such low money that we can give him a pretty big pay raise and it's still not that much money.
That's fair.
I think Brad Guzan's like on 800,000. I think Sean Johnson's on 550 or something like that. So like some of the best keepers in the league are not on super high money. So I think we'll be able to keep him around.
Cool. You want to talk about, I mean, Pochettino had, I think, his best game.
I think so too. I think he benefited from kind of playing a bit more of a free role. He was playing centrally, but also would drop in deep to pick up the ball. He would end up on the right wing sometimes, and him and Gallagher would end up, or Stroud would end up kind of switching places, and he would be higher up and wider than the winger. And so I think he enjoyed kind of that free role, did some really dangerous and useful things with the ball. He still gave it away a couple of times just for no reason, like just no real, like it wasn't in a dangerous area, and just tried to do something that he didn't need to. And then maybe shot the ball 1 or 2 times when he shouldn't have. But aside from those few little mistakes, yeah, looked really solid.
Yeah, let's go through a few of the stats. So we talked about possession. Austin had
one more player I do want to mention is Danny Pereira. Danny Pereira was excellent. I think I just like forgot how good he had looked in moments before he got injured, but he was great. I think just dribbling past players, some really useful passing, and then just how calm he looks on the ball, and his facial expression never changes. He never looks like he's in a big rush or anything, but at the same time is working really hard and doing some really good defensive work. So I was really impressed with him, and am very glad to see him back, because I think he's going to be a big player for us, not only this season, but I think he could be a star in years to come as well.
Yeah, he seems to be a difference maker. I saw somebody posted another one of those comparisons of like the first round of the Super Draft and production to date online again today to remind us of what Philip Mayaka has or has not done and what Danny Pereira has done. So
yeah,
again, great choice from the scouting department.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into some of the stats from this game. So you mentioned possession earlier. Early in the game, Austin was like hovering close to like 70%, but that can be deceiving. It's not always the biggest sample size, but we get to halftime and Austin finishes the first half with 67% possession. They finished the whole game with 69% possession. And so absolutely dominated the ball. I think later on, Portland had kind of thrown in the towel, which probably led to that a little bit. We had some Olay moments towards the end of the game where Austin were just passing around because they could. But I think even if it were a bit tighter, Austin was going to keep it above 60 easy, if not closer to 65. We had 13 shots as opposed to Portland's 5. And then this is a stat that you found, Jeremiah, about shots inside the box. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so so we had 10 of our 13 shots were inside the box, which seemed like a really high percentage. So I went back and looked for us. I went back and looked at every match, and it wasn't the most. I think San Jose, we got a higher percentage of shots from inside the box. But this is probably unsurprising, but the more shots we have inside the box, the more likely we are to score. So I think in the games we've scored, we've had like 68% of our shots have come from inside the box, and it's closer to 50-50 on the games where we haven't. And this is one where, we've just got a lot of higher percentage shots than we've had in other ones.
Yeah, and then talking about shots on target, we had 8, and Portland only had 1, which is the one that went in. So one stat that was a little bit confusing to me and to a lot of other people is the expected goals. Austin scored 4 goals, but the expected goals was only 1.45. And Portland only had 1 shot on target, but their expected goals were 0.83. What does that mean?
I don't get that. I think the questions were, considering how many opportunities that we had and how many good opportunities we had, and stuff like Pochettino had a good chance, that Jimenez ball hit the crossbar. Like, it just seems like our expected goals should have been higher than it was ultimately. But I guess that's one of those things that works out, right? Because going into this game, we had the biggest differential to the negative between expected goals on the season and actual. So I think I'll take this, makeup of a couple goals here for sure.
Yeah, being on the other side of that statistic. Yeah, and I think honestly it's an imperfect stat, but also I think this stat becomes more true over time if you look at a team's expected goals over the span of a season. A lot of times you're going to see it kind of even out. And so I don't know that it's entirely meant to be used on a shot by shot, game by game basis, and is probably not going to be accurate if it's used that way. But yeah, I still admittedly do not understand expected goals well enough to understand how Hector's goal and Diego's goal were both like below a 0.2. Yeah, I don't know. Lots to learn about these kinds of stats for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the post game stuff and attacking flexibility. We got a question at Fourth Tap about whether Josh would stick to this 4-3-3 or be more flexible, and I don't remember what we answered, but I'm sure I was wrong if I did answer that question, because I very much have a belief in my head that Josh Wolff has his system and sticks to it and never varies from it, and then absolutely varied from it to beautiful effect. So why don't you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think I've seen Wolff and I've seen other coaches get a little bit annoyed by people's fixation on formations, like quote unquote formations. whether it be a 4-3-3 or 4-2-2, because they'll tell you like it doesn't matter what formation we line up in. It matters like how we move and where we go within that formation. Because you could say like in this game we lined up in a 4-3-3, but if you look at the average positions of players, it's like a 3-5-1 for a lot of the game. And our left wing and our central midfielder had a very similar average position. And so I think Wolff's system has more to do with the movement and kind of the principles of moving the ball. And then the formation is something that I think he clearly is willing to change. And then in this week's Monday press conference, I think Chris Bills asked him if he would ever be willing to go to like a straight up 3 at the back and play 3 center backs, not just dropping Ring in, but actually starting 3 center backs. And he's like, yeah, we've talked about that. It's something that we'll probably implement at some point in the future. And so it seems like he is very willing to be flexible with that. But what's not going to change is the principles of play within that formation. And I think you're always going to see him try to dominate possession, try to disorient and disorganize the opposition with the movement of the ball. I think in games past, we've seen Austin keep possession, right? But we haven't always seen them disorganize the other team with the ball. This game, we did it. It's exactly what Josh Wolff wanted to happened. And I think if they can build off of this and do it more going forward, then that's it's exactly what Wolff wants. And so I think he'll take a lot of encouragement from this week for sure.
I think one other thing I want to get to before we go on, because we've got a player to talk about too, or a new player to talk about too, is so was this good Austin or bad Portland?
I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
That Portland, they have some injuries, and I heard some like Portland fans and some other people asking if like, okay, they have some DPs missing, they have these people missing, this guy's on international duty. I would still argue that 3 of their 4 best players were on the field that night. Diego Valeri was there, Diego Chara was there. Eric Williamson has been fantastic this season. He was there. They're missing Blanco, which he's maybe their most talented and still like most informed player. Missing Niasgoda, who's a striker. So missing some players for sure. And then also just didn't look quite on it. I think they've been on kind of a bad run of form. But Austin also looked fantastic and played a really great game. And so Portland, as we mentioned last week, they're a team who knows how to win. They just have that pedigree and have that experience. So I don't think we should say like, oh, this game doesn't mean anything because Portland was bad. Portland is still a quality team with some really good players on it. And Austin FC dismantled that team very, very definitively. And so I think we should still be encouraged by it, but we should not like get too high on this win either, because it's one game and we're going to be seeing some tougher teams in the very near future.
Yeah, I'd say it was one data point, but it was a great night, and we should all just sort of enjoy that and see if it continues. You know, I think connecting that game with another one like it coming up this week will go a long way towards seeing whether the system is really sunk in, and you know that this is going to be an ongoing thing and not sort of a fluke performance.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with some information about Austin FC's new signing, Moussa Djitte, and then we'll also do a quick preview of the LAFC game coming up on Wednesday. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education.
You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. All right, we are back with some Austin FC news, and I think the biggest piece of that is that we have signed a striker, and his name is Moussa Djitte. He's 21-year-old forward from Senegal, and it looks like he's going to be on the U22 initiative, aka Young Money. So, Jeremiah, what do you think?
I'm excited about it. I always love these, like when people have instant reaction, as if somebody, right, as soon as the signing comes out, people are like, this is a good deal or bad deal. Like anybody really has in-depth knowledge of what's going on in League Two in France. So,
yeah.
But I think after watching some highlight videos and like hearing Claudio talk, it's great. And it obviously comes in a position of need that we always knew was a position of need, and even more right now seems more important. But Claudio did talk about how this is something they've been working on all along, and this is not a panic buy, but part of a plan to make them strong both now and in the future. And I think his age really helps tell the story about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, like regardless of how much you do or don't know about him, the fact that he is a striker and seems to be a pretty capable one, like that alone is very exciting, because we currently have 0 of those people on the roster. Not even, we have 0 players who like have actually played striker most of their lives. And so just to have a guy, you watch his highlights and his skill set, the way he plays, he is a out and out number 9. And that's, just an exciting thing to see. So playing in League 2, is that how you say it?
It's not League 2, so it's like, yeah, I guess.
League 2 in France. So the second division in France, which is a pretty good league for prospects, I guess. There's a lot of guys who ended up in the Premier League, playing on Champions League teams, and then in MLS as well. A lot of players have come to MLS from that league. So pretty good scouting grounds for MLS teams. As far as the timeline goes, they're already working on his visa and things like that. So they're thinking his first MLS game will likely be July 22nd against Seattle, but said there's an off chance that he might be ready for the Tigres game, which is it July 13th?
It's on July 13th. So that's a possibility. Okay. But regardless, we should see him in action on the 22nd.
So talking about what kind of player he is, Claudio Reyna said that he's creative, mobile, aggressive. I've watched pretty limited video of him, and I think that's all pretty apt. He's not huge. I want to say he's like 5.
I think he's 5'11",
5'11" or so, but like a pretty solid frame on him. And so I think they had him listed at 165 pounds. That sounds small to me. He looked bigger than that on the field, but big enough to do some hold up play and kind of hold defenders off, but still pretty mobile and aggressive, makes really good runs, and seems to be just one of those guys that has a nose for goal, just like knows when to shoot, and seems to hit the ball really hard as well. So again, just looks like a real proper striker. He is 21. I think if he was coming into his first game and we still hadn't scored a goal in X number of games, I think that would have been a pretty rough scenario for him to step into, where this kid is 21 years old, moving to a new country, to a new city, to a new team, to a new league, and is expected to be the savior of Austin FC. I think this game against Portland takes some of that pressure off. Hopefully we can kind of keep these goals going, where we can work this kid in to the team in a patient and healthy way for him and for the team. Because I don't think it would be very fair to expect this young guy to come in and be our only option for goals going forward.
Yeah, that's for sure true. And one of the things, if you're somehow disappointed that this is the guy that we're bringing in, Claudio talked about striker is by far the most expensive player, on the field. And if there's just like the math doesn't work to go out and get somebody who scored 20 goals in a season as a striker and bring them to MLS, or even 10. So you sign based upon potential. And he seems to have like the good potential and the good skill set, and they've done their study. So I think we have to be encouraged by it. And and just the way the roster is being put together with this mix of youth and international youth and MLS experience.
Yeah. So I had a question. They sent this to me in a direct message on Twitter, so I won't say their name. They can out themselves tomorrow when this comes out if they want to. But they were asking about using this U22 initiative. Is this a sign of Austin FC being cheap, signing these types of players, or like what does this mean about Austin FC's ambition essentially? And I don't think it's being cheap because you don't have to sign these players, right? They're still spending good money on these players. So part of the deal with the U22 initiative is the transfer fee doesn't count against the salary cap. And so it's essentially extra money that you do not have to spend, but are allowed to. And so if anything, it's more of a sign of ambition. I would say looking at how ambitious they are is going to be the next one or two signings, how much money they're spending on those guys. And I've said this since the beginning of the season. If Cecilio Dominguez is our most expensive player at the end of the year, then maybe that's a sign that they are not necessarily willing to spend a ton of money. But signing these three U22 players. So we have Rodney Redes, Jean Kolmanich, and now Moussa Djitte. I think that shows a lot of ambition actually, because again, it's spending money on young players that you absolutely do not have to spend or not required to spend on these players. So I think it does show ambition from the club for sure. But as I mentioned, this is not a designated player spot. I saw some people online acting a little bit disappointed that like, oh, this is our last designated player spot and we spent it on this kid I've never heard of from France. I was like, no, this is not the DP spot. This is a U22 spot. We still have the one free DP spot. And the players we mentioned last week on the show, so the guys like Sebastian Driussi and Vincent Janssen and like those type guys, we could still sign one of those players and have the space to do it. And potentially if they use some of the mechanisms we talked about on the show last week, could sign two more players of that caliber. And so there is still a lot of room to spend a lot of money and bring in a lot of firepower for sure. So some of those rumors that we mentioned, we said Driussi, it seems like that one hasn't completely gone away yet. So that might still be a real thing. And then one other that I saw this week was Michael Estrada, who is a 25-year-old Ecuadorian playing at Toluca in Mexico, is one that popped up. It's just on Twitter, and I haven't really seen it reported many other places, so it may be nothing, but it would be interesting to me if they signed another striker. What do you think about that, Jeremiah? Should they use this DP spot on a striker, or would you rather them see it used as like a right wing or like a different type of attacking player?
Yeah, I think we need one more attacking player. I don't feel like it needs to be a striker. Either another attacking mid or a winger is where we need to be. Because with the way they played, not that they can play this way every time, but with the way they played today this week we talked a little bit about how you can get the best out of Gallagher and Stroud if they're each playing a half and just running, and so to not have to count on guys like that and give them a little bit more breathing room. And that's with everybody in the attack right now. We still feel like we're like one player short a bit in that. Not that there's like a glaring single hole, but just collectively, over the course of the season, we still need a little bit more firepower there, I feel like.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Gite he's an unknown quantity, essentially. He's a young guy. You don't know how he's going to adapt. You don't know how he's going to slot into the team. So I don't know that you can necessarily bank on him. But at the same time, I think he's coming from, like, again, League Two in France is a decent quality league. And with a lot of players coming to MLS and to other leagues who have stepped right in and been really good. So I would almost want to see them use this DP spot on like maybe a right winger that can also play inside, essentially like the mirror image of Cecilio. Like,
yeah.
Maybe like a bit more of a like playmaker-y type guy, like a bit more of a number 10 than Cecilio is. But like maybe aiming a bit more towards like Carlos Vela, like that playmaking winger who can kind of make something out of nothing. That's kind of the profile I would like to see them go after. But as far as what I expect to see, I honestly do not know what they're going to do.
No, that's probably fair. So I want to talk about the opening of the Columbus Crew Stadium, even though it's not Austin FC related. And there's lots of, the Twitter wars started back up a little bit, and there's some stuff. I think they ended up not being able to. Something happened at the tifo. They couldn't have their first tifo for the game. But specifically, I want to talk about the fan jackhammer goal celebration. Did you watch that? Well, you couldn't avoid it if you're on Twitter, but did you see it in person? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I didn't watch it live, but I did see a lot of video of it on Twitter. I think whenever, like, there's been a lot of talk over the last few years, but like, what should Austin's thing be? Like, what should be the gimmick that we do? And I was like, admittedly, like, excited about some of the ideas that people had, like essentially trying to copy Portland. Like Portland, what they do is a gimmick, but it's pretty cool. Like, and it's pretty powerful. Like seeing Timber Joey like slice off a bit of a log with a real chainsaw, that's kind of a cool thing. And so I understand why people are trying to copy it. But after seeing this Columbus one with the jackhammer, I'm like, okay, let's maybe take a beat and let's just like not have anything for a while. And if something pops up, then let's do it. But like after seeing these goals the other day, like just like everybody losing their minds and being really loud in the stadium is a pretty good alternative, right? Like it's the way people have been celebrating goals forever. So let's just keep doing that for a while.
Yeah, like the bright green LED bath and the people losing their brains is perfectly fine with me. And yeah, I mean the Portland thing, right? I mean, like, I don't know the complete history of this, but I think Timber Jim just like showed up with a chainsaw, at a game and asked me to like saw a log. I mean, so it was like, it wasn't like they were looking for a gimmick or or a ritual or anything. It's just something that happened, and I think that
it came out of that fan base. Yeah. And so if Austin's going to do something, I want it to be something in that same vein where just like something that comes up eventually. But that does not seem to be the case with what Columbus did, and it's kind of like scared me off of the whole idea. And I'd rather we not do anything than like jump into something like that.
Let's take a break for a minute before we do that. Yeah. And the Nashville one, which I think we talked about with Phil, which is kind of goofy, but so they have so they have this guitar riff before the match, and they have this guy that's Soccer Moses, right, that we talked with, I think, Brad Tillery about.
Yeah.
When we interviewed him, and they managed to combine both of those, which to I said somewhere, like, kind of went from like brutally awful to magnificently awful to have Soccer Moses be the, play the Gibson riff before the tiff or whatever it is. Like,
yeah,
I love that. It was like so absurd that I loved it this week. So
it was awesome
to Nashville.
And I don't remember if we talked about it on the show, but Brad Tillery told us that night that so Soccer Moses of Nashville fame is, I don't know if they're still active, but was the lead guitarist for the popular Christian 90s rock band Jars of Clay, which like blew my mind because like, yeah, just Jars of Clay was like very much a part of my life as a child. And then like this new phase of my life where Soccer Moses is adjacently a part of my life, and to find out that it's the same thing, just like, yeah, it really blew my mind. So that makes it even better to know that like, yeah, he's like, oh, he's actually a professional guitarist who has just been like dressing up as Soccer Moses at these games, and that's all anybody knows him for. But then, surprise, he's actually really good at guitar too.
Yeah, it was a good riff. No, that was a beautiful combination of everything to get in there. I mean, they had had like pop radio hits and stuff too. So it's Jars of Clay are not an insignificant band during that time. Okay, that's enough about rituals. Let's talk about LAFC a little bit. Wednesday night at Q2.
All right, yeah. Tell us a little bit about the history of LAFC.
So, not very long. So they've only been around since 2018. Sort of born out of the ashes of what was it, Chivas USA?
Chivas USA. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they were actually announced in 2014 and didn't start playing until 2018. Finished third in their first season in the league. 2019, won the Supporters Shield, which means they had the best record in the league before losing the playoffs. They had a deep run in the CONCACAF Champions League that year too, right? I think they were the first MLS team to make the final. So there were high expectations for 2020, but they finished 7th. They got bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Again, they're still deep. They're still talented. And they didn't lose a ton. So there's high expectations for 2021 also. But they got off to a little bit of a slow start. And one thing that we talked about was they played week 1 against Austin FC. And Vela came out like 21 minutes into that game, and we all, like, it seemed like he didn't really want to. Remember, that was like a miscommunication between him and Bradley.
He was acting mad at Bradley for pulling him out. He's like, I'm not hurt. But then he ended up missing like 3 or 4 games after that, right?
Yeah, he did. So clearly that was a legit injury, which was kind of weird. But since he's come back, they've started playing better. They're now up to 5th in the Western Conference on 15 points. But there's a big I think we're at 13. So there's a huge log jam, and a lot of that log jam is between. There's like way varying numbers of games that teams have played. But I mean, they're there. They're competitive. They should be good. They're still deep.
Yeah, they've not been in great form this season, but Vela seems to be finding his stride, like you said. And I think, I don't know, if we play like we did against Portland the other day, we can absolutely beat LAFC. They are not at the peak of their powers, but they are so talented and so deep that on a given night, if they're clicking, they could absolutely destroy us. And so we can't, like I said about the Portland game, we can't get too cocky about this one game because Portland wasn't great that night. LAFC could potentially be great on Wednesday night because they have the potential to be great on any night.
So what should we expect from them in style of play?
So honestly, it's like not too far off from what Josh Wolff wants to be doing. Maybe a little bit more aggressive and direct. And I don't know that they're going to be as willing to just like hold on the ball and kind of pass it around, but very much if they lose the ball, they want to win it back quickly. And so they're pretty dangerous on those counterattacking moments, but they can also just possess the ball and beat you that way as well. So kind of, I know like Bob Bradley's like ideal is kind of like that Barcelona style. Like everything he does, he kind of models after FC Barcelona. And so if you've watched what Barcelona does, it's kind of aiming at that. Just on it, they're not as good as Barcelona, but that is what very much what Bob Bradley is aiming for and achieving on an MLS level at times.
Yeah, typically they've been a really high scoring team, but they have not. I mean, this year they're averaging a little over a goal a game, but they're not. You know, used to be they'd have a lot of 4-3, 3-2,
right,
5-3. They've just like run up and down the field and play no defense, and they have moved away from that a little bit.
Yeah, their goal differential is only 1 this year. They're +1, so they've scored 13 and given up 12. So, and against Real Salt Lake the other night, they barely kind of squeaked one out and scored one. I might have been, I don't remember the stats. It might have been their only shot on goal that night was the one they scored. But so yeah, they are in a tough way. But like we said, Vela is coming back from injury. Looks like he's in pretty good form over the last few weeks. So we'll definitely have to be careful there. One thing Chris Bills mentioned in the MLS Striker podcast was he talking about going to a back 3, like finding ways to try to neutralize Carlos Vela. Chris Bills wondered if maybe we would see Austin FC go to the back 3 again, or at the very least see a ring kind of dropping in between center backs again as we're building the ball up, just to try to prevent those dangerous counterattacks with Diego Rossi. They've been kind of rotating in their striker, but it could be Corey Baird, and then you've got Carlos Vela, and then also some really dangerous midfielders. So that could be something to see. Maybe we'll see another wrinkle entirely that Wolff has been saving for this game. But yeah, I'll be very interested to see how Wolff approaches this one tactically.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know, they play that the way they played worked so well against Portland. Do you see that as something that we just did because it was Portland, or is that an ongoing thing, or is that just a wrinkle in a series of wrinkles, or
Yeah,
you are not interested in making a prediction on that?
they're a very different team than Portland. And so they're not going to sit back and just let us have the ball. They're going to pressure us. And so we cannot expect to play exactly the same way as Portland. I think we could still use some of the same principles and some of the same ideas that could translate into this game, but LAFC are not going to sit back and let us work the ball around. They're going to come at you and punch you in the mouth and try to take the ball and shove it down your throat, essentially. So yeah, I think there could be some of it translated over, but he'll have to do something different. I'm just not sure exactly how he's going to approach that.
Gotcha. All right. So hopefully next week we'll have another show that we're excited about, because we'll have another 4-1 victory at home. I'll be covered in beer showers again, just as before. But other than that, I think we're probably ready to wrap it up.
All right, cool. Yeah, before we finish up, we'd like to remind you to rate and review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And then we'll also encourage you to come find us on social media. So I'm on Twitter at elviahero87. Jeremiah's at jbentley_ATX. And yeah, always looking to continue the conversation there. And a lot of times we'll ask for questions and use those questions on the show. So find us there, and then check out the Striker Texas website as well. So I think one of the interesting articles this week is Chris Bills's tactical analysis of the Portland match. Makes a lot of really, really good and interesting observations in that, just kind of seeing what we did differently in that game that ended up working.
Yeah, that was a good one. And if you're interested in more of the goofy MLS fan culture stuff, Phil West has a what's his from the West Stand or whatever it is. He published an article this week, sort of covering some of the rituals and things that have gone on, which is just a pretty good overview overall of the things that go on in the league if you're not super tuned into that.
And there's been a couple of like fan generated things as well. Both Chris interviewed a Portland fan, and then Scott Specht from Los Verdes kind of wrote a little piece outlining his experience joining supporters group. So a lot of really awesome stuff happening on the Striker Texas right now. Subscribe, support your local journalists. Lots of good stuff happening there. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer, where we will cover the latest in Austin FC news and we'll review the LAFC match. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
No one is around.